And then she just was quiet for a second, and then she said, "I'm gonna miss you, Joey."
And next thing I saw was a shadowy figure run between the two windows in our living room towards back to that lake.
And I went to feel for a pulse on her neck, but was not able to feel for a pulse.
A few seconds later, I could see a gap at the bottom of the comforter near the door, and it looked like a human toe.
Everyone got into fights with their family, at least while they were living under the same roof. But in some cases, the fights turned to hatred, then to tragedy. This is the case of Nicole Natchman. When she was 21 years old, she reached a breaking point and killed her mother and stepfather. Let's dive in. Nicole Natchman was born on February 11th, 1994, to Miriam Deans and Ronald Natchman in Texas. But she didn't exactly have a stable childhood. Everyone in her family was in a state of constant change. Nicole's mom, Miriam, had been married before to a man named Joseph Carey. They'd married in the early 1980s and had two sons, Joey and Kevin. Miriam and Joseph lived in Houston, Texas, until they split up in 1992. The next year, Miriam met Ronald while playing volleyball. They soon started dating, and just a few months later, Miriam moved in with Ronald. She'd lost her job. However, what Miriam didn't tell Ronald was that she was still officially married to someone else, and she had two kids. Joey and Kevin were conveniently living with their grandmother in Tampa, Florida, out of sight, out of mind. Ronald did learn about Miriam's past bit by bit, but she never told him that she was still married to Joseph. Less than a month after moving in with Ronald, Miriam was pregnant. By August, Joey and Kevin came to live with them, but Miriam's lies would not sit well with Ronald. In September, he moved out. But the story doesn't end here. In early 1994, Miriam was getting ready to give birth. That's when she invited Ronald to move back in with them.
She called me on January 31st, she called me at my home and invited me back to the birth.
Okay, so you were present when Nicole was born?
Yes, ma'am.
Ronald was not only present for Nicole's birth, he took care of her almost 24/7 for her first year.
Nicole and I slept in the sunroom, and I took care of her every day.
Why is Ronald then holding back his tears as he talks about his daughter? Well, for starters, in January 1995, Miriam started a lengthy custody battle over Nicole. The battle lasted 3 years, with baby Nicole getting swapped around between two fighting parents. Eventually, Ronald lost the battle. He would never see Nicole again. What makes this even stranger is that Ronald had another daughter from a previous relationship, and he had no contact with her for years either.
It's accurate that you have another child that you haven't had any contact with since she was 6 years old, correct? It's a yes or no question.
That would be true.
When Nicole was kindergarten age, Miriam took her to Tampa to live with her grandma. Just a year or so later, Miriam wanted to move again, this time to Virginia. That's when Joey stayed behind in Tampa.
So I just immediately thought it was going to be a mess again, so I wanted to stay where I was happy.
This is just to paint a picture of how agitated Nicole's family was, but she wouldn't be living with them forever. After graduating high school, Nicole began attending Florida State University in Tallahassee. That's a 4-hour drive from Tampa, so she would be away from her home during her studying years. She started studying history, but then changed her major to public relations, after deciding that, quote, "there's no future in history." It was the summer of 2015, and Nicole was back living with Miriam and Robert after completing her freshman year. For the first month of her summer break, Nicole visited her brother Joey in Washington State.
While she was there that summer of 2015, did she ever discuss any issues with you about your mom?
Nothing out of the ordinary.
Okay.
Nothing, just typical.
But something was brewing inside Nicole's mind. Something absolutely no one around her saw coming. In August 2015, Nicole applied for university housing in Tallahassee, but she was too late. Apparently, there were no more dorms left for that school year. Of course, this was a problem as Nicole lived 4 hours away from the school. But just a few days later, the university called. They could give her a space in overflow housing. This was a temporary accommodation for students awaiting regular dorms to free up. But the overflow housing required a flat $100 fee, which Nicole couldn't afford at the time. That's when she called her cousin David to ask if she could borrow the money. When he agreed, she turned up at his house in 5 minutes.
I just knew that she needed to borrow the money, so she showed up, she gave me a hug, and I said, she said she needed the money, I gave it to her.
The two even joked that this probably seemed like a sketchy drug deal from the outside. Then they hugged once more, and Nicole left. A few days later, she would murder her parents. It was August 20th, and the Rowe family, who lived right next door to Nicole and Miriam, were talking about the high school that their daughter was about to attend. Around 9:20 p.m., Wesley Rowe and Elizabeth heard loud gunshots coming from outside.
We heard a pop, and then I heard a pop. It almost sounded like fireworks. And I was kind of thinking maybe, there were some kind of kids outside, doing fireworks.
Wesley went downstairs to see what was going on, and he heard a long scream.
It wasn't a kid scream, it was kind of scream of, agony or disbelief. And next thing I saw was a shadowy figure run between the two windows in our living room towards back to that lake.
Wesley knew something serious was going on, and he dialed 911 and urged them to come to his drive. While he waited for the officers to arrive, he looked outside the window. That's when he saw the body of Miriam Deans oozing out of her head and torso onto his driveway. When the officer arrived at the scene, everything was dark and silent. All he could see was a woman lying in a pool of in a driveway.
I put a glove on my right hand and I went to feel for a pulse on her neck, but was not able to feel for a pulse.
Did you call for EMS?
I did.
Medical services?
Yes, ma'am.
But there was nothing that the medical services could do. Miriam had in her head once and twice in her belly. While the officer went around the neighborhood looking for potential witnesses, Sergeant Robert Carr arrived on the scene. He went to the Dean's residence and noticed that the door was ajar. After repeatedly asking if anybody was inside and getting no response, the sergeant decided to go in, determined to do a welfare check. Inside, he and his team discovered a locked bedroom door.
As I was able to get the door open in from left to right, I immediately on the floor saw a comforter that was covering up, not knowing exactly what it was at the time. A few seconds later, I could see a gap at the bottom of the comforter near the door, and it looked like a human toe that was sticking out from underneath it.
Nicole had also killed her stepdad, Robert. He had been in the head about a day before Miriam. The police were thinking perhaps this had been a murder. Miriam killing Robert, then taking her own life. But who would shoot themselves in the belly twice, and then in the head? Miriam also had abrasions on her forehead, indicating that she had fought her killer. Soon enough, the police found a crucial bit of evidence in the house: a small, pink fingerprint. It was Nicole's, and it had Miriam's blood on it. But as far as the police knew, Nicole was staying with her grandma. However, multiple neighbors confirmed that Nicole had been to Miriam's house in the days leading up to the shooting. Detective Michael Messer took over the case and began seriously looking at Nicole's behavior.
I needed to talk to you. You had said that you would have been staying at your grandmother's house. I guess.
Yeah, I do that sometimes, but like, I didn't tell her that, please.
Are you?
I've been here a day or two, so.
Nicole said she was driving, so Michael asked her to call him back later. When she didn't, he spoke to Nicole's uncle. He would call her and press her with the detective's questions.
I think Wednesday you left there?
Yeah, like really late.
Was it Tuesday or Wednesday, Nikki?
It was the 19th.
Michael was already painting the picture of a criminal who is digging themselves into a hole with lies. But then he got an even better clue into Nicole's mind. She'd left a voicemail on his office phone. There, she kept blaming other people and saying she isn't sure when she left Tampa. Then, Joey called her.
So, I started off with the normal chit-chat, love you, we'll see you soon. And then she just was quiet for a second, and then she said, I'm gonna miss you, Joey.
Just like that, just very matter of fact, I'm gonna miss you, Joey.
Yep.
Nicole's strange line didn't make sense to Joey from the get-go. In fact, at first, he even thought Nicole was thinking of taking her life, destroyed with the news of her mom's death. When he asked her not to hurt herself, Nicole asked, why would I do that? Joey wanted to know what she meant with her strange line.
And she says, I shot him. I said, you did what? Like, I shot Mom and Bob. I said, and I remember leaning forward. On the couch and saying it again. It's like, what do you mean you shot Mom and Bob? I was like, why'd you do that? Or something to that effect. And she just started crying really bad.
While she was crying, Nicole started talking really fast, to the extent that Joey couldn't understand a word. Finally, Joey calmed her down, and Nicole started explaining her past few years. Apparently, following a school trip to London a few years back, she started hearing high-pitched screams in her head. She couldn't sleep, and her mental health got worse and worse. Then she told Joey something that would make zero sense to him.
She said, if I had only gotten the good news phone call about the dorms earlier, I wouldn't have had to do it.
Nicole then said she wasn't sorry she did it, but she was sorry she had to do it. Apparently, she was supposed to be going back to Tallahassee on August 19th, but she received a call saying she wouldn't be receiving a dorm room that year. First, she shot Robert with his own gun, knowing her mom was away for the weekend. The voices in her head started calming down, and she thought this was a sign from God that she should finish the job and kill her mom too, in order for the voices to fully stop. But as she was waiting for Miriam to get home, she started getting cold feet. She jumped out the window just as Miriam pulled into the driveway. It was too late. She would see Robert, so she had to die. When Nicole got to her overflow housing, she asked her new roommate to cover for her, saying she'd moved there the day before. But soon enough, Michael Messner was in Tallahassee with an arrest warrant for Nicole. During her trial, Nicole's defense team argued that she suffered from battered child syndrome, and she believed she had to kill her mother to save her own life. Even if that was true, it didn't stand as a reason for her to kill Robert too. The defense attorney argued that Nicole suffered a schizophrenic episode when she killed Robert. So schizophrenia on one day and then self-defense the next? Furthermore, Nicole had never showed any signs of schizophrenia prior to the murders. It's unclear if she was even telling Joey the truth when she talked about the voices. The defense brought a psychiatrist to say Nicole was schizophrenic. But the prosecution psychiatrist, Dr. Lazaro, proved the defense psychiatrist had completed her training 40 years ago and was using a method that no working psychiatrist uses currently. Nicole was not schizophrenic.
Because she doesn't meet the criteria for schizophrenia.
Right, what does she want?
She doesn't have any of the symptoms. The hallucinations, she doesn't have any hallucinations. I asked her directly about symptoms consistent with schizophrenia. She denied that.
Nicole even denied telling Joey she heard voices telling her to kill her parents. The defense just didn't stand. Nicole was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Nicole's attempts to paint her mother as the villain, who made her scared for her life, simply didn't work out. Attorney John Terry said of Miriam, "It's a sad story that cannot offer anyone closure. Nicole will spend the rest of her life behind bars, while what's left of her family will try to rebuild their lives and put this trauma in the past." And that's the horrifying case of Nicole Natchman. Thanks for watching, you guys. Hey, don't be shy. Give this video a like and subscribe. And if you can take it, why not check out our other disturbing cases? Have a good night, stay safe, and take care of each other. It's scary out there.